The following video tutorial is presented by Sunstar Electric Inc. and your submersible motor reseller to demonstrate the proper method for uncrating, handling, inspection, and setup of the 6-inch and larger Hitachi submersible motor in order to best assure your installation is trouble-free. Please refer to the F1 handling and installation manual that accompanies every unit for specifics and safety warnings. The Hitachi submersible motor must be properly handled and prepared immediately prior to pump unit assembly and installation. Thank you for using high-quality Hitachi submersible motors. Hitachi submersible electric motors are shipped in certified export crating. Although they are identified by stenciled data on the exterior, the motor specification should be verified by the nameplate data on the motor. Hitachi motors are retained in their crate to prevent movement, which might damage motor components. Carefully remove the wood retaining blocks and all retaining block nails or staples before attempting to remove the motor from the crate. The motor is wrapped in plastic sheeting for limited protection against moisture, debris, and atmospheric contaminants. The shaft retaining bracket prevents shaft rotor movement during shipment. Ensure that the shaft retaining bracket has not loosened in shipment. Do not use the leads or shaft to pull, lift, or handle the motor. Protect the leads and the shaft at all times during unpacking and installation. When using a lifting sling or strap, wrap the properly sized strap around the motor and properly choke the strap. Do not wrap the strap around the plastic shipping sheet, as the motor may slide through the sheet during handling. When lifting the motor, ensure that the lead cables do not become pinched or abraded between motor and crate. Lift the motor to a position where the bottom of the unit can be readily observed. Inspect the small vent hole in the diaphragm cover and ensure there is no debris or fluid blocking the hole. If fluid is present, determine if the fluid is condensed atmospheric moisture or a fluid mixture containing propylene glycol. Propylene glycol has a sweet taste and usually feels oily when rubbed between fingers. If the fluid contains propylene glycol, contact the Hitachi representative before proceeding with install of the unit. Set the motor down so it is standing vertically on the end cover feet. Do not set the motor down into mud or debris that may become lodged in and block the vent hole in the diaphragm cover. Visually inspect the exterior of the motor for any obvious physical damage. Ensure there are no leaks or weeping of fluid at the sand slinger or shaft, joints, or fasteners and fittings. Inspect the serial number tag to ensure that the motor is the correct horsepower, voltage, speed, and size for the job. Ensure that the motor is properly tagged with a yellow fill label and NSF certifying label. Measure the 6-inch motor shaft for proper shaft projection. Begin by removing the shaft retaining bracket. Once the shaft retaining bracket is removed, turn the shaft a few revolutions. There may be a clicking sound or knock when starting, stopping, or changing rotation. This sound is being made by the thrust-bearing pivot pads as they shift position inside the motor. If the shaft is difficult to turn by hand, install the shaft coupling and turn with a strap wrench. If the shaft will not move, then you may be required to relieve internal pressure. This is accomplished by loosening one of the vent fill plugs under the top flange on the mount bracket. If the shaft still does not move, contact the Hitachi representative before proceeding with install of the unit. With the shaft free, it should settle into the down position. In this position, the down thrust bearing is seated on the pivot shoes and the shaft rotor will not move lower. For 6-inch motors, there is a shaft height gauge that can be used. Place the gauge on the top of the shaft, with the designated A section resting flat on the top of the shaft. With the gauge situated in this position, the legs, or B sections of the gauge, should not be touching the motor mounting flange face. There should be a gap that ranges from approximately 5 thousandths to 25 thousandths of an inch. If measuring with a depth micrometer, the shaft projection, when the shaft is in the down position, should be between 2.875 inches and 2.869 inches in height. For 8-inch motors, the shaft projection should be between 4.00 inches to 3.990 inches in height. Consult the manufacturer's standards for shaft projections on 10-inch and larger motors. Hitachi submersible motors are filled at the factory with a solution of fresh potable water and propylene glycol, which acts as an antifreeze. Some seepage may occur during shipment, so the internal fluid level must be checked prior to install. Position the motor with ready access to the vent plug or plugs located below the mounting flange. Remove the plug or plugs. Pour or inject clean potable water into one of the vent holes. Do not inject deionized or demineralized water into the motor. When clean, clear fluid backflows freely from the vent hole, the motor is full and any air has been vented from the unit. Seal and reinstall the vent plug or plugs. Electrical tests on submersible motors should be performed by trained professionals. Observe all safety precautions when performing electrical tests on Hitachi submersible motors. Always consult the equipment manufacturer's operating instructions for proper operation and reliable results. The motor must be electrically tested prior to install or splicing to power cable. The first test to perform is the continuity or resistance test. This test ensures that the motor has a continuous connected circuit. This test is performed with an ohm meter. Ensure that the motor lead conductors are isolated. Connect the probes to two leads and apply the voltage. Alternate the probes to test continuity between all three phases. Test A to C, B to C. Record your results. Consult the manufacturer's resistance data for proper resistance test results. The second and more important test to perform is the insulation resistance or Megger test. This test ensures that the insulation system of the motor is intact and not short-circuited. The results indicate the strength and reliability of the insulation on the conductors and the connections of the motor. Recommended test voltages are 500 to 1000 volts DC for motors rated at 200 volts AC to 1000 volts AC. 5000 volts DC for motors rated as 1000 volts AC to 4160 volts AC. 10,000 volts DC for motor ratings exceeding 5000 volts AC. Adjust the Megger to the proper test voltage. Connect the positive probe to the conductor on one of the three motor leads. Attach the negative probe to a bare metal component of the motor. Apply the test voltage and allow the winding to charge completely. Document the insulation resistance reading when it settles and remains constant. Consult the manufacturer's insulation resistance data for acceptable resistance test results. A simplified Megger for 500 volt or 1000 volt non-adjustable voltage operations is the model M-501. As previously described, connect the positive probe to one of the three motor leads. Attach the negative probe to a bare metal component of the motor. Apply the test voltage and allow the winding to charge completely. Document the insulation resistance reading from the LED indicator lights. Consult the manufacturer's insulation resistance data for acceptable resistance test results. The motor is now ready to continue assembly to the pump and unit installation.